Right, hi everybody. Oh, hold on, let me get rid of this. I'm tripping over. So, as always, nice and easy. I know it's warm, but the term warm up is probably a bit of a misnomer, to be honest. It's not just about body temperature, although that is a factor, but it's just about doing something that gets the oxygen around your muscles and joints and ligaments and tendons, so that they sort of soften up, and the joints themselves, the synovial fluid in the joints also needs time to soften up. So I mean, if you've been sitting down for a while, for instance, and when you get up, the joints are a bit stiff, a bit of movement, and they start to loosen up. So this is very good for that. And for the other things that I've talked about in the past, you know, things like this sorting out your posture, getting the feel for the movement, feeling the connection in the body and the rhythm and so on and so forth. And that stronger feeling if you apply the image of moving through water. Just trying to settle into this stronger feeling within your body, so that the sort of soft tissue, the muscles and so on and so forth around your back, your belly, your chest all start to just loosen up and become a little bit more elastic. So that will help things like your breathing come more smoothly. As you stand, try not to artificially pull your belly in. And remember the muscle tone that we're looking for, that has this sort of elastic quality about it. Your hips dropping back. Raising your arms a little. And shake out. Let's start with this little rocking exercise. Just rolling your weight in your feet, forwards and backwards. Imagine doing this in water, so there's a little bit of effort required. But it shouldn't be a sort of, for want of a better term, a hard effort. Feeling the connection from your ankle up to your knees, knees to your hips, hips to your shoulders. Just recognize that a movement that is barely noticeable in your ankle gets to be significantly bigger by the time it gets to your shoulders. And then you can bring your arms into the movement. And as the movement travels down the length of your arms into your fingertips, we end up with quite a range of movement. Sitting back and then easing forwards. So remember, if you were standing in water doing this, you wouldn't just do that, because it would be quite hard. You go forwards and you just let your arms follow on. And then you go back and trying to keep all the joints of your body just soft, slightly curved, particularly when they're kind of knees and hips, elbows, that kind of thing. The fingers also, you see my hand there, it's kind of soft, rounded quality, like you're holding a ball in your hand and you just wrap your fingers around it. One very useful way of getting the feel for that is if you just place your hand on your kneecap at the center of the palm of your hand on the top of the knee, and just let your fingers wrap around there. And that kind of gives you that. Some people like to do it on the forehead, put the hand on the middle of the forehead, and that pretty much the same, depends which suits you. And it's quite useful to start to think about hands and arms, the expression of the movement, and so they'll make a difference to the overall flow of the movement. And if your hands are sort of splayed out and tight, it's like there's nowhere for the movement, nowhere for the energy to go. And then bringing your hands around, weight slightly forwards, hips dropping back and pushing up, and just trying to maintain that same style of movement. Feel of the movement, the rounded quality in the joints. So when you come up, for instance, here, you come up to this position, you see my hips are still dropping back, not that, but that. And then go back further, and so on and so forth. Start to just follow the chain of the movement, the build up of the movement from feet up to your knees to your hips, from there up through your back, spine to your shoulders, down into your arms and your hands. And keep a nice, steady, even pace. And then we're going to change to the wild goose. So with this one, your hands are palm down the whole time. So there's a fair amount of resistance. One way you can get a feel for this is to get hold of a feather. I mean, if you get hold of a feather of a largish bird and just wave it up and down in the air. That is a really good example of the sort of quality of structure that we want in Tai Chi. Very light, very supple and soft, and yet very resistant, very strong, especially when combined. Then when we change to Art in the Clouds, most of the time, come a bit closer. Most of the time, when they turn, the hands are cutting through the air, cutting through the water. So there's less resistance. There'll just come a point where your hands will naturally want to rotate. Now go back to rooting down and see if you can notice those and other little differences between the two movements. It doesn't matter what you notice, and I mean, don't even concern yourself whether it's kind of real or correct, because if you've noticed it, then something has made you notice it. So, but what you don't want to do is to necessarily hang on to it and think, well, this is how it is. This is more about training yourself to recognize those differences. Do one more round of this. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. But again, just using that awareness to help you get a sense for what's going on within your body, wherever you happen to feel it. I suppose you could say there's a twofold purpose in this. One is that by training our attention in this way, we actually deepen the possibility of a connection and a cooperation, if you like, between what we think of as mind and what we think of as body. That whole thing about the three jewels, body, mind, and energy, combining into one, and hence any particular movement being influenced by all those three things, not just the physical. All of that will improve with the training of awareness. And the other, which is kind of almost a kind of offshoot, really, isn't necessarily why it was there in the first instance, but is definitely significant for us, I think, is that this inward focusing, the deeper it goes, the deeper and more effective the sense of quietening and stillness that we often associate with and often come to Tai Chi for. One more time. Change. That deeper stillness is an interesting one because it goes beyond any notion of simple relaxation. The association with the movement, and in some cases with quite complex exercises. And if you're interested, if you follow up the martial side of Tai Chi, if you're interested in that, with the kind of like potentially aggressive, stressful situations, because we find that deeper quietness within all of those, it's more useful, shall we say, than simply sitting and relaxing, which is a good thing to do, by the way. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. This is something that we carry with us. When we start to register changes that we didn't intend, suddenly you feel, oh, hold on, why is it tight there? Or why am I doing this? And you realize that you'd lost that focus of attention and you were losing that stillness. So I sometimes say to people that an awareness of posture and movement offers our mind a quiet place to rest, that still center, because of the focus of attention that it brings. It's also true that our body, if you like to think of it as a separate thing, can send messages to the mind, you're losing it, and so on and so forth. One more round. And then changing. And if it's comfortable, add in the turn. Switch sides. And once again, add in the turn if it's comfortable. Yeah. rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Now do one more of these, but when you get to the forward position, around about here, turn and sit back as you bring your hands in, and then turn back. Again, let your hips go back, around, and in, polishing the table. Turn in, again, hips going back. Your hands stay at about the same level, and you drop down towards them. Maybe getting as far as being between them, but probably not. Or at least not if you're me. Very carefully, of course. As always, you know, this would be fine. This is really about thinking of that counterbalancing movement. Hips go back to send your shoulders and your hands forwards, not just leaning forwards. Pivoting on your hips. Very carefully with your back, of course, and your knees. One more time. Good. Give your legs a shake. My usual message at this time of year, of course, when it's warm like this, is to say, remember to drink. They do say that by the time you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So especially if you're doing something physical, you will lose water. It's always a good idea to take a few sips every now and then, even if you don't really feel that you need it to replace what you're losing. That too will have an effect on things like muscles and joints. Remember, we're 70% water. I can't remember the exact figure. So we need the water. Everything that happens in your body needs the watery environment. And so, you know, stiffness, tiredness, all of those kind of things could be, I'm not saying are, but could be related to just simple dehydration. It is very warm at the moment, of course, wherever you are in this country at the moment. I suspect you will be losing water, moisture more quickly. And they're simply drinking water. I'm not talking about anything else. Okay, let's go into bear place, starting with the shoulder rolling. Sink your hips back. Use the rise and fall of your hips to move your arms through. The movement comes up into the chest and expands outwards, pushing your elbows out, pushing them up, leaving your shoulders very smooth. Feeling the connection again, feet to knees, to hips, shoulders to elbows. And then using the turning movement to just shape the movement. You come up in the middle, you turn, you go into the leg on the side, opposite the way that you're turning. So if you turn right, you go into your left leg. If you turn left, you go into your right leg. And it's that same elbow that will come forwards. Nice. You know, almost like somebody's massaging your back here. Nice and smooth. And then into the bear plate. So this is a movement of the weight and a a horizontal rotation in the center of your body. Now bring your weight to the middle and go for the vertical rotations. This will take us into swimming dragon. But before we do that, just get a sense for what's happening here. And you feel very subtle movements and changes as your pelvis just tilts slightly. So the bigger movement focuses our attention once again on the smaller movement. Now, next time you do Part in the Clouds, see if you can detect some of those smaller movements, because that too is a vertical rotation. Hands following you. I'm going to bring my feet together as always, whichever is easier for you. Up and down. So for the head and chest, your arms can reach nice and easily. But when you go below the belly, don't do this. Do this. Squat slightly. You've done, and if you can't, if your knees aren't up to that, then don't try and go that far. It's quite difficult with your feet together, especially. Change direction. Okay, and check out swimming dragon. Okay, so just do stretching between heaven and earth. So remember with this one, there are various stages. The final one being that you're up on one leg and so on and so forth. But go as far as you're comfortable with today. Don't think it's a competition. Even if last time we did it, you were able to do more. Don't think of it as more. It's just what are you getting from this when you do it, and to an extent, what do you need? Because I think there's obviously a need if you're interested in learning the art. Sometimes you think, well, I've got to do this because my teacher said I've got to learn this, and I need to learn it and get good at it, and so on and so forth. But if that's all you ever do, then you're missing something in your practice. And if you practice every day, then when you get up in the morning and you go outside or you go wherever you're going to go, at least some of the time, ask yourself, well, what do I need at this moment? What do I want? What would I like to do? What's attracting me? And, if you're a bit stiff in your back, then maybe you do one thing. If you're a bit tired, maybe you do another, and so on and so forth. So these exercises and these practices and the ideas that go with them are like tools. And if you've got a big toolbox or a shed with lots of tools in, you don't go down to the shed and think, right, well, I better get the screwdriver out and go and use it if what you're trying to do is to saw a piece of wood up, because it's the wrong tool. So we have to find a balance between increasing our awareness of those tools and our ability to use those tools and actually using them for our own benefit. I have certain things that I'm working on, but at any given morning, I may or may not do that. If I'm thinking, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I feel like I need to do this or something like that, then that's important. We're training our awareness of ourselves. That's true for all of the exercises. So stretching between heaven and earth, starting off with your weight in the middle, and do it with a little bit of a push up and down, so you maintain that connection. You don't necessarily have to do it like that according to the textbooks, but I think it's good to keep that connection. Turn the hands palm up and palm down. So turn your right hand palm up, push up. Do the opening across your body and down. The hands coming very close to each other, almost touching, grasping the tiger's ears and push up. A slightly diagonal quality. Your hands stay in front of your body. It's rare that the hands go behind the body in Tai Chi. And they do sometimes, I know, in some of the exercises that we do. But here you can see my hands staying in front, not doing what is actually quite common. We all do is this, pulling back. As soon as I do that, I'm sort of constricting the back and I'm pulling on the chest. But if I can get to here, the back remains open and I'm soft in the front of the body. So that's, which of course is always what we're looking for. So again, we can get that sensation of our back being very gently massaged. And then a little move across if that suits you. So my left hand, your left hand is up, your weight's in the left. Try and avoid this. Come back to the middle as you sink down. So at the moment, you'll be getting about 60% of your weight across is all. You want to get to a point where your head is going to be directly above your foot. As you can see, my head isn't above my foot now, but if I raise the opposite heel, it comes a little bit closer. And that means two things. One, we're in better alignment, so any weight is more likely to go down through the supporting leg. It also means there's less weight in the other leg. So the next step is to just bring your foot in and out again. So what we don't want to do is to find ourselves in the position of having to go, right, because you can see I'm already kind of throwing myself out. It's really just a drawing in of your foot, very smooth, sinking down. And you'll notice I'm now stepping a bit wider because that suits me better. And because I'm stepping wider, my feet are turned out. And because I'm stepping wider, I can practice this squatting down movement. And then again, if it suits you, you just raise the leg. So thinking about the movement of the empty leg, there's a contraction inwards and a bit of a rotation in your hip, and then that turns to a vertical rotation down, horizontal rotation out, extending the foot a little bit, but not locking your knee out. Okay, and then shake out. So remember, you know, if it intrigues you to try and stand on one leg, and as I've said before, I'm not a massive kind of fan of trying to do that. It can be a kind of indication, I guess, of how your alignment and so on and so forth is doing. But the effort that you make to try and do that can have an impact on your balance and on your stability in general. Because if you can be kind of like, if you can be on one leg and only really have a few little wobbles like this, and maybe even manage to sort of reduce them a little bit. When you're on two legs, you're laughing, really, aren't you? You've got two legs there. From a martial point of view, standing on one leg is pretty useless. And Tai Chi as a martial art only really deals with low kicks. And there's a whole strand of Chinese martial arts about that. And one of the interesting things is that they use the phrase sometimes that you're kicking on three legs, because Tai Chi is and other Chinese martial arts, which is close range. So close range would be, and I know some of you, and if you're not interested in the martial side of it, I'm not suggesting that you have to go off and do it. But actually, it's quite interesting to understand something here, particularly when we're talking about standing on one leg. I wouldn't be here in Tai Chi. I would be here. I would be in touch with my opponent or with my training partner, their arms or maybe their shoulder or something like that. And therefore, if I was going to try a kick, it would be something like that or something. Hence, I'm on three legs. So I've got my leg, and I'm also using the support of my partner. So it's actually it kind of makes sense if you see what I mean. When we do sort of like slightly higher kicks there, but even this, which comes from Tai Chi forms, would be in touch. So we're not trying spinning kicks or anything like that as a rule. Now 1 foot forwards. So this time, as you transfer your weight, it's to about 60% in the front leg, maybe as much as 70 in the back leg. And I've talked before about this arriving, and this is very much linked with that quality of stillness that I said about earlier. But it's also got a quality about it that I think is really important. I get there, and instead of just going straight back, there's a sort of series of things that happen, a kind of releasing feeling around lower back, hips, buttock, knee, and that kind of thing, which is a kind of settling in. Now, it may be associated with a slight drop, or it may not be. That's not necessarily a kind of external thing, but it's the same sensation as we would get when we do that movement, the rooting down movement. So it really, as well as giving you this sort of quieter moment, within that quieter moment, we really kind of consolidate the dropping of the center of gravity, the rooting down, the alignment of the body. You may find when you do that, you get to here, and you may find a slight movement forwards. You may feel like that. That's not really going to happen until we do this. So I go forwards, and then I've got 60% of my weight in. I let the back hip drop, and that bends the back knee and raises the back foot. And as I do that, it's just a sort of boom. I just go drop more. Again, it feels like you're moving forwards. When I go back, I'll show you from this side. When I go back again, this hip drops. So this is the empty hip I'm now talking about. And in dropping, if somebody were to come up to me and push in there, that would happen. And you see, so the drop in there helps to raise your toes. Now, I would emphasize this because it's the opposite to how we would normally do this sort of thing. You see, we can find ourselves very easily doing this, coming up to raise the foot, up to raise the foot. We want to stay down. So we're not looking for speed or power, or is power when we normally think about it. We don't need to build momentum. We're not looking for long movements. It's not like striding out or something like that. What we're trying to do is once again get to a point where almost all of the weight of the body is actually in the supporting leg. And then when we get to here, pull from your hip to your toes and just let the foot slide in. Pull from your hip to your heel. The leg contracts. It may come off the ground a little bit, but to really get it to come off the ground, as you pull, you also flex your ankle, so that raises the toes. All of this is done maintaining the level hips, the level pelvis. It's actually the foot extended there, but you get the idea. If you want a higher step, again, you raise the knee. And that's that rotation of your hip again. Oops. And if you want a longer step, you don't strain in your hip, you don't strain in your leg. This is where my foot naturally goes down. If I can drop down a bit more, my foot will go down there. So the sinking down helps us to lengthen the step. Moving on the other side. So this is how we begin to move the leg, to step in and so on and so forth, without losing that alignment. Later, when you practice this, and when you've also practiced things like rowing a boat and polishing the table that we did earlier, then when they start to get put together, these two things have a big influence on our sort of normal everyday walking. Because we angle the body when we walk. And especially if you're in a bit of a hurry and you're trying to walk past or run. And then raising your toes and your heel. When these different elements have gone through a process of training in physically, particularly for the body conditioning, training in terms of the movement, the energy, where that is going, training in terms of the mind, then they begin to work for us quite kind of automatically in a way. Stephanie. Again, you'll notice my front foot is slightly turned out to open up my hip, so the weight more likely to flow through it. And then taking some steps. And then going back. Good. And so we focus our attention on that, but then we come to the exercises that we do using those movements, and of course we can no longer consciously think, oh, well, this is happening. So we train sort of particular areas to once again happen, not on automatic, not unknowingly, but without us having to pay direct attention to them. Once again, a very practical element here, I think. So have your right foot forward. Just do bird folds its wings. Because you don't want to walk down the road, you go out for a walk with a friend. You don't want to say, right now, I'm going to drop my hip and I need to just raise the heel and then more my weight goes in, because you'd never get to talk to your friend, would you? On the other hand, you want to be confident that the stuff that you learn in Tai Chi is working for you, that you're not straining, you're not hurting yourself, that all the sort of benefits that we think about still potentially there. And then fisherman cast a net. And then wind blows the willows. Raising your toes and your heel. And you may find that the turning helps with that. And when, or if you're ready, stepping in, following the same approach to the step in that we did a few moments ago. And then in your own time, if it's appropriate, raising your knee. Come a little bit higher. Not as the case may be in that case. And perhaps even with this rotation, this vertical rotation in your hip, oops, shouldn't really try and talk while I'm doing these things. Just be careful of the tendons on between the hip and the groin when you do this. You don't want to do too many to start off with. Okay. Left foot forwards, third hold its legs. Fisherman cast a net. Wind blows the willows. Raising your toes and your heel. So what this actually is a transition to the movement called Dragonfly Skims the Water, which would involve actually stepping forwards at this point. So that might be a bit, without knowing what space you're in, that's possibly a bit tricky. So you can begin to step in your own time. Again, you might decide, well, you just want to stop here and feel the connection from your hip to your foot. That's fine. You might want to raise your knee. If you take the foot right up, even if you don't really, try and think in terms of this, that the foot extends and your hands start to go down, your elbows drop as the heel drops, your toes drop as the fingers drop. And maybe with this little rotation as well. It's the ball of your foot goes down first. But so there's a little bit of kind of connection and synchronicity between upper and lower body. So sometimes it's useful to notice these little moments when two things happen at once, and then you realize after a while it's not two things, it's one thing. Maybe we should call this one Dragonfly Hovers Over the Water rather than Skims. I don't know. Good. And rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. Over the side. And your back. And your hips. Light on your belly. And the upper part of your chest. This is tapping exercises, by the way. I was talking about the warm-up earlier. They do make quite good warm-up as well. I tend to do them at the end of these classes. But so embrace tiger, return to the mountain. We talked about how this has a sort of centering effect, and it can be very useful to us out there when things get on top of us and so on and so forth. There's another element to this, I think, which is important, particularly in a class. Sometimes there can be a lot of information there. We can get a bit, I've got to learn this today. Must get this because he said it and so on and so forth. But it shouldn't be like that. Think of this as a slowing down. It's like if you get a glass or a bowl or something like that, put it under a tap and turn the tap on full blast, the water will go in, but it will also bounce out. And then if you turn the tap down slowly, it'll be kind of more efficient in a way. And just be comfortable with what you've retained. As I keep saying, you can always ask questions. Can you go over that again? Can you explain that more? But also, trust that you're able to absorb these things in this moment of slowing down. You might want to take notes. I mean, I'm very happy to have notebooks in the class and little reminders for yourself if that feels it helps you as well. But this slowing down is a chance for what you've actually learned to become embodied. Somebody once made a distinction between information, and there's plenty of that around in our world, and knowledge, knowing something. And the phrase he used, a guy called Richard Heckler, he said that knowledge is information embodied. And he was an Aikido practitioner, so I think it's safe to assume that with his background in working with the body in a very soft way, as they do in Aikido, he was, when he talked about embodied, he was talking about something that we would recognize. So embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more time. Stand, take a couple of nice, slow, gentle breaths. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So